Welcome to Improve Your English Writing video number 47, where I'll be covering 3 punctuation marks. I'll be covering the brackets, the ellipsis, and the slash, and specifically I'll be covering changes or additions to direct quotations, which is a rule on brackets, omitted material in a direct quotation, which is Rule 51, and a rule for the ellipsis. Another rule for the ellipsis is fragmented or incomplete speech, Rule 52. And then a rule for the slash, which is to separate alternatives or lines of poetry, which is Rule 53. If you'd like to get notifications for this series, please click subscribe. If you like the video or you think others will find it useful, please click like. And check out links to videos and books in the description, like a link to the companion volume here. So let's get to rule number 50 on the brackets. So rule 50 says, use brackets to enclose a change, an addition, or a comment within a direct quotation. So brackets are used for changes. Basically, you're adding something to a quotation which is not there. So when you do that, you use brackets. So the AP, if you're using AP, it uses parentheses instead of brackets, because I believe you cannot transmit brackets, I think what they call over the wire. So therefore, since there is no brackets in the newspaper style, you use parentheses instead. And then see video number 67, which is quotations part 2, for more information about changes, additions, or comments within a direct quotation. So this video is just basically to get to the point about the punctuation. So some examples is, I married that year, 2017, Cody replied. So basically, the 2017 is not in the original quote. You're making an addition or a comment. I married that year. Maybe you just using this as a snippet out of something. And if you just say I married that year, people may not know what you're referring to. So since you put an addition or a change and you want to tell them of the year, you put that change or addition or comment in brackets. So there you have, you would put square brackets around 2017 since it's a addition or comment. Another example, and then AP style would use parentheses around 2017. So this is how it would appear in AP style. The next example is, for this direct quotation, is the co-founders, Jobs and Wozniak, founded Apple Computer Company in 1976. Once again, maybe you're quoting, or someone is quoting something, maybe in the original quotation or the source, it would it would be clear who the co-founders were, but you include this addition or comment to the quotation. You put it in brackets just to make it clear who the co-founders were of Apple. So this addition or this comment within this direct quotation is enclosed in square brackets. And then maybe just, I know you saw the last one, but if this was AP style, you would not use square brackets, you would actually use parentheses. So the last example is a change. I think I covered this in the video on quotations, but here's an example. According to Bushman, a bad historian fails to separate opinions from facts. I believe the original quote has a different verb tense for fails, but since it's been changed, you've actually changed the word here, and specifically in this case the tense we'll see in a different video. This change here, since we make a change to an original quotation in brackets. Once again, if this was AP style, you would actually put parentheses around fails. So here's an example of a change within a direct quotation, so use brackets. The ellipsis, rule number 51, is use an ellipsis to show omitted material within direct quotation. So if you omit some, so if you have a direct quotation and you omit some words, sentences, you would show that omission with an ellipse. So just rereading the sentence, use an ellipsis to show omitted material within a direct quotation. A period before an ellipsis or add in a period before an ellipsis to show the words before and after the ellipsis form a complete sentence, even if parts of the sentences are omitted. So basically, you use an ellipsis to show omitted material, and if what comes before and after the ellipsis, if they actually both form a complete sentence, then you use a period after the ellipse. We'll show that in the example. But here's the rule. Just to some more clarification is, you do not use an ellipsis before the first word of a quotation or after the last word of a quotation, unless the sentence is in MLA style or is intentionally left blank. Meaning, most people are not too sure if they're quoting something and they've omitted some words before the quotation. They want to use an ellipsis, and then they've omitted some words at the end of the quotation and they want to add an ellipsis. You generally do not use an ellipsis at the beginning or at the end of a quotation. The only time you do that is if you're writing in MLA style, or if the sentence is intentionally left blank. That's applying to the end of the quotation. So, but let's look at some examples. So, and one more clarification is an ellipsis is actually 3 space dots with a space before and after the ellipsis. So it's, here's your text. You would have a space, dot, space, dot, space, dot, space. This is an ellipsis. There's also an alternative format for AP style. AP writes an ellipsis with 3 closed dots with a space before and after the ellipsis. Think of it as an ellipsis as a 3-period word. So it would have the text, space, three periods, then the other space, and then you continue with the text. The general theory of I always say the AP style is that it's written for newspapers and magazines where space is limited, so they're interested in closing up everything. So if you just think of it that way, AP style does not want it's limited space, so everything, they're trying to compress everything, in my opinion. So that's actually how you write an ellipsis. So here's a general rule. Here's a clarification. You don't use it at the at the beginning or end of a quotation, unless it's MLA or intentionally left blank. And then ellipsis is actually 3 space periods, but in AP style it's 3 closed periods. Now let's get to the examples. I'm sorry. And more clarifying thing. APA allows either style of ellipsis. Just be consistent. So an ellipsis with inside a sentence. The accident was caused by the defendant. Now some words have been omitted right here. So to show that omission, use 3 space periods. The word, space dot space dot space dot space. This is the ellipsis. So the accident was caused by omitted material, the defendant. And an AP style would just have the ellipsis would be 3 closed dots. Another example. This is an example where we use, you almost want to call it the 4th dot, but if you have a sentence before, maybe backing up to this sentence, this is one complete sentence. A sentence, there's not a complete sentence before the ellipsis, there's not one afterwards, so there's no period here. But in this case, you have omitted word, you have omitted text, but you have a sentence before and after the ellipse. So the accident was caused by driver error. That's a sentence, so we can put a period, and then we put the ellipsis, bang, bang, bang. So it's almost like 4 periods. In this case, the evidence points to the defendant. So this is how you handle an ellipsis when you have what comes before the ellipsis is a sentence, and what comes after the ellipsis is a sentence. Even though you can't really tell if material has been deleted in either sentence. So don't worry about that. It's just something has been omitted here, but for sake of, I call clarity, because we have 2 sentences, we put this period here. Hopefully that makes sense of when to use the period and when not. So I'm just saying a complete sentence or complete sentences before and after the ellipse. I've just explained that. And then the AP style would be you would have the period, and then you would have a space, 3 closed periods, space, and then you continue on. Maybe this format helps visualize what's actually going on with the structure. But this is what I call the AP style, almost the compressed style, and this is the regular style of writing, the period with the ellipses. So what about at the end of a quotation? Well, you typically do not include an ellipsis at the end of a direct quotation. So just if it occurs at the end, just leave it. You say the paragraph begins, the contract term is 4 years. Maybe you deleted words. Maybe this sentence continued. The contract term is 4 years and the defendant blah, 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 blah. Well, you've deleted that and you think, oh, should I put an ellipsis there? And the answer is no. You just put a period and you call it good. So normally you do not put an ellipsis at the end of a direct quotation, even though you've omitted words from the sentence. The only time you put an ellipsis is that if you intentionally leave it incomplete and you want to show it as incomplete. You say, so the Chicago Manual style would write it this way. The paragraph begins, the contract term is blank, blank, blank. You just put an ellipses, you'd end it. The Chicago Manual style actually says that you do not use a terminal mark, meaning because most people are going to be, hold on, shouldn't there be a period somewhere here to show that the sentence ended? And the answer is no for Chicago Manual style. What you do is that if you had a sentence that followed this, it'd just be a space and then capitalized. And that capitalization would show that it's a different sentence. So that's how you'd write in Chicago Manual style. But in the Griggs Reference Manual, it actually says if the ellipsis occurs at the end, you need a terminal mark. It doesn't give an example with a period. But I suppose it's this because we know a period from other rules goes inside the closing quotation marks. So it's just based upon examples in the Griggs Reference Manual, even though it does not have a specific example of the period, I would assume it's this. The paragraph begins, the contract term is blank, blank, blank. It would do it this way because it wants to show at the end of the sentence, it wants a terminal mark. It says you must provide a terminal mark. The only other answer is to put it outside the closing parentheses, but we know that by every other rule or by the other rules that the period goes inside the closing quotation mark. Now, MLA style, it would actually leave, but this is how, without a source citation, I'm just not writing the complete sentence out here. It's 4 years. It's like a continuation of this sentence. What was my first example? 4 years, and then remember I was saying that this could go on. It would actually put this is how it would do, how it would write an ellipsis at the end. Now it actually says if you've omitted material at the end, you need to include the ellipses, or normally you would not. And then it also says that you put the period, since you need to put a period, you need to have a terminal mark, you put it inside. It's one of the reasons I believe the Griggs Reference Manual is like this, because the MLA style tends to adhere to slightly what I call older rules. So this is how you'd format it. An ellipsis at the end of a sentence in MLA style. This is how you'd end it. Then if you had a source citation, which I will cover source citations in a future video, like, I don't know, what is it, like video 75 or something like that. Well, you would write it. You'd have, and I've omitted some of this here just for fitting it all in one line, but you would have the ellipsis at the end of the sentence. Then you would have the source citation, and then you would have the period. So it wants to, because MLA, once again, I'm just restating it. If you've omitted stuff at the end of a sentence in MLA style, you need to put an ellipsis, or normally you would not. And then if you didn't have a source citation, this is how you'd end it on this first bullet. But if you had a source citation, then the terminal mark comes after the source citation. So this is MLA style. So basically, choose your reference and follow these examples for an ellipsis at the end of a quotation. Most of the time, because probably most people are not writing MLA style, and you don't need to intentionally leave it blank most of the time. Most of the time, you're just going to write it like this. There'll be no ellipsis. Probably for 9 out of 10 of people watching this video. So let's go on to the next rule about the ellipsis. Is use an ellipsis to show fragmented or incomplete speech. So just a note, use a dash to show an interruption. So when you have an interruption in a sentence, you use a dash, but to show fragmented or incomplete speech, you use an ellipsis. You say, if this person said like, I left for lunch, no dinner that evening. So how you just heard me say that with the faltering or fragmented speech, if you want to show that faltering or fragmented speech, you would insert an ellipsis where the fragmented speech is occurring. So that's how you'd write that. And if you sort of said it as like, I was just going to something like that, where it sort of trails off at the end, and it's left, the speech is left incomplete, then you'd show an ellipsis at the end. This is obviously written in Chicago Manual style format. But the AP, to show this trail off at the end of a sentence, would actually just use a dash. So the AP uses a dash. Remember, AP wants to compress this. This is too much room. It can just get it done with one punctuation mark. So even though it's not, this dash normally shows an interruption, it's actually, AP will actually use it to show a incomplete sentence where the speaker just trails off. So the slash, use a slash to, so rule 53, so use a slash to separate alternatives or lines of poetry. So the slash is also called a slant, a virgule, or virgule, I think it's virgule, or forward slash. No doubt I'm going to get some comments about mispronouncing that. I'm sorry that I did. So I usually don't see it. If I can see slash, slant, or forward slash. It's normally how it's referred to, but use a slash. It is referred to by these other names. So other uses of the slash include dates. So you'll find slashes in dates. So see that to video number 55, rule 77. It's also used in fractions, which is in video 58. It's also used in 2-year date ranges, also video 58. Whoops, on those no doubt we could probably find some other miscellaneous uses of slash, but basically it's this rule right here. So alternatives or lines of poetry, or is used in dates, fractions, and 2-year date ranges. That's probably, remember, all these videos are following what I call the 80-20 rule. So 80% is probably more than 80% of the uses of the slash. So let's look at some examples for alternatives. And just a point of clarification, do not use a space before or after the slash unless an alternative is an open compound. So you'll find a lot of people using space before and after slash, but you don't. There's no space. So it's word slash word. So there's no space on either side of the slash unless it's an open compound. And I do recommend avoid using the slash and trying to replace it with the words and or based on the context. Sometimes you can do this, sometimes you can't. And if the paired terms form an adjective, you could actually replace it maybe with a hyphen. So look at those alternatives instead of using a slash. Look, I would look to using the words and or if it's looks like it's going to be an adjective. A hyphen may be a good choice. It all depends on the context. So here's some examples. The menu offered the choice of soup and or salad. So here's the alternatives and or since these are alternatives, we put a slash between them. Notice there's no space before or after the slash. And just as an alternative, maybe you could rewrite this depending on the context. Maybe you could say the menu offered the choice of soup or salad. Instead of, if that works for the context and the meaning, then try to replace it with one of these words. Maybe this is a good alternative than the slash. Both countries disputed the east-west border line. So east-west, here we have an alternative because, technically it's the east border to one country and the west border to another country. So the east-west border line. So the words, these are alternatives. Slash, no space before and after. And maybe you could rewrite this as the east-west border line. Maybe this works. Maybe this is a better way to write the east-west border line. The last example is my father loved the Korean War / Vietnam War exhibit. So here we do have two alternatives, and we separate them with a slash. Now notice these are actually open compounds, or it's not just one word. These are Korean War and Vietnam. These are, I'm going to call them an open compound. So since these are both open compounds, or at least one is, then we actually put a space before and after the slash. Imagine if there was no, if it was Korean War / Vietnam War. You probably confuse it with War and Vietnam were the alternatives, where actually Korean War and Vietnam War went together. That's the reason you need to have a space here, is that if you didn't have the space here, you make War in Vietnam somehow an alternative, that these words are alternatives, and they're not. The alternatives are actually this compound here, both these compounds. And maybe you could rewrite this sentence, the Korean War and the Vietnam War exhibit. Maybe you could write it that way, So once again, like I said, this would depend on the context. So there you have it for the slash for alternatives. Let's move on to lines of poetry. So use, in this case, with the slash, you do use one space before and after the slash when you separate lines of poetry. So usually poetry is written on lines, but when you quote it or you can write in a book, you won't actually format it how it's formatted with each line. So to show that line division, when you quote it, you actually use a slash. So Robert Frost penned, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep." And then normally, if you actually read it in his poetry, this whole but I have promises to keep would actually be in a different line. But just to keep it in the running text, you can put a slash showing the line of poetry, the break, and you do put a space on either side of the slash. So that's it for this video. For notifications to this series, please click subscribe. If you like the video, please hit like and check out links to books and videos in the description.